Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. It is 2:02. Today we're doing Vendor University's Accounts Payable session for REM vendors or Sears only vendors. So go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So we are recording today's webinar. Later today I'll send out the link for you, as well as the PowerPoint to all those that are attending. And on the next slide, we're going to go ahead and cover just some quick webinar etiquette. If you could be sure to put your phone on mute when you're not speaking, that would be great. If you're listening to the audio directly from your computer instead of calling in, please be sure to mute your computer's microphone. This really helps to minimize background noise for all participants, otherwise it can get really distracting. So you can access your computer's microphone options by going to Control Panel, Sound, and then Recording tab. So I'm going to go ahead and toss this over to Jonathan.
Hi, good afternoon. I am not sure if everyone there is in one room or is everyone kind of remotely connected?
So everyone's remotely connected, so they could be located across the country.
Okay, good. Good. So if anybody has any questions, just raise your hand and stop me anytime. I am Jonathan Johnson. I am, I'm the Accounts Payable Control Manager as well as the Sears Vendor Payables Manager here in Plano, Texas for Sears Holdings. I've been with Sears Holdings about 9 years, a little bit more than that. Started out, I've done some receivables work with the receivables team. I've done some specialty accounting things I can't talk about. I've done accounts payable control, as I mentioned earlier, and then and most recently I've been given the post as leader of the Sears Vendor Payables team. So I've been with Sears Vendor Payables for now about 5-6 years, somewhere in there. Today, for today's session, we're just going to go over what's important to all of you. There is some key contacts for Sears merchandise, questions, concerns, comments. Talk a little bit about the invoice matching process and some of those requirements to make sure that process flows through smoothly. And then we'll go into, of course, some errors, discrepancies, how to resolve those errors and discrepancies, and then I'll leave you with some key things to remember that you can take back to your respective groups, companies, so on and so forth. And just a quick reminder, what I'm speaking to you about today goes just for Sears. Some of the things are going to seem very, very similar to the Kmart process, but today, just Sears. Questions so far? Good. As I mentioned before, some key contacts for Sears. Now, there are a lot of you and only one of me. I do have a small team of folks that work on such matters. In order to make sure that people go on vacations, people are out of the office, people take long lunches, in order to make sure that your inquiries get handled efficiently, we do ask that you send any of your questions to a generic email address. Now, I know people feel some kind of way about generic email addresses. However, in this case, trust me, it works much, much better. That email address is monitored by the entire team. There is a system in place that makes sure the emails get answered, they don't get lost. There's a timer on them to make sure they get handled in a certain amount of time. So that's really what you want to make sure. Oh, welcome. That's really what you want to make sure that you send your inquiries to make sure that that email is tracked and make sure that several sets of eyeballs see that email. And another thing, if you're not already set up on Sears Business Exchange, many of you will find that a wealth of information that you would have otherwise sent an email to AP Help about, you can get that information yourself by using Sears Business Exchange. I'll show you briefly some later slides how that kind of works and what Sears Business Exchange looks like. But just know the way to get set up for it now, if that was the burning question in the back of your mind, you'll send an email to vendors@searshc.com. Very, very simple. So those two email addresses on the screen are going to be your lifeline to get questions asked and answered. So,
Payable. So I just realized I went over this before, I didn't even notice it. So Sears Business with Change doesn't actually exist anymore. They migrated all of that content over to the Sears vendor portal. So now that's where they will find all of this information on the Sears vendor portal.
Sure. So for some folks there, the information is still out there. I still use it.
Well, they're shutting down Sears Business Exchange, so eventually it's going to go away.
You're burying my lead. You're burying my lead, but okay, go ahead.
Just letting you know. Sorry.
Sure, yeah.
Ramona, that's John, not Abel.
That's fine. I'll be able. Fine.
Oh, sorry. I just saw Abel as the name on the presenter.
Abel's name's on it because Abel's computer works for the presentation. That's really the only reason.
Okay, got it.
Thanks.
So jumping right into the invoice match process is a three-way match. A three-way match happens to get the invoices sent in and paid. The three pieces that we need a purchase order, we need the invoice, and then we just need a receipt. When those three objects are fed into our invoice processing system, and then short answer shorter, a payment comes out the back end. All right, so in this three-way match process, really, the purchase order number is the key here, as noted by the graphic. You want to make sure that that PO number is present and absolutely correct, because if it all starts there. If the PO number is incorrect, the invoice can't match to anything. The receipts will sit there and cycle, and payment will never generate. So again, that all starts with that purchase order number. Essentially how it works is when you send an invoice in and it matches with a purchase order, you're always going to see a payment for that invoice. Okay. Now, you may also see a deduction or a claim for the entire amount of the invoice or a partial amount of that invoice. Okay. This is so that you can make sure that the invoice did come in, it did get processed, we did see it. However, there are some things that would cause a claim against that invoice, things like some of the inventory or some of the receipt didn't quite match, or it matched fully and there just wasn't enough of the receipt there. So we would take a claim for the missing inventory or the missing receipt amounts, or if the receipt was not received at all, there'd be a claim for the full amount of the invoice, which of course would cause a zero remit. So when you see an email, or excuse me, not an email, but when you see a remit come to you and it's got an invoice number on it, and let's say that invoice is for $10, and then you see a claim right after it that's also for $10, that is usually an indicator that we never received that merchandise. So the invoice did come in, the invoice did match a purchase order, but without a receipt in the system to kind of to go ahead and pay it. It was a claim was put in the system, and that invoice was netted down to zero. So as you see on the screen here, claims can be the result of merchandise shortages, or even let's say a pricing discrepancy. You've got one price for the item, we have another, and selfishly we're going to take the price in our system for that object or for that product, and then the difference will be deducted from the payment via a claim. And again, total non-receipt of merchandise will also generate a claim for the entire amount of that invoice. Questions so far? Good. Wanted to talk about, also on the screen here, I've got payment terms. We do operate on a receipt of goods based terms program. So for most people, for most vendors, the receipt of goods automatically is going to add 5 days to the terms of that invoice. So payment will not generate, let's say you have 60-day terms on something, automatically it's going to add 5 days receipt of goods. That's that transit time. It's going to add that to it, so payment will not even generate until the 65th day. And then depending on how that payment is processed or how you receive payment from us, additional days may be necessary to get a check to you in the mail, or for EFT warehousing, or if you're on any payables, you'd see it the very next day. So payment. Just remember, payment terms are based on receipt of goods, so if you're like, we're getting we're getting paid 5 days late on all these invoices, it's because received goods is automatically being added to them. All right, so the 95, 96%, 99% actually of our invoices are fed to our system via EDI. So for those of you who are on EDI, we thank you. For those of you who are not, you'll need to get on it before we can process your merchandise invoices. Simple as that. If you're not on EDI, it is a third-party platform. It's an industry standard, so many companies, it's not proprietary to us. Many companies are using EDI systems and EDI processes to transfer invoice data back and forth. A couple of things with it, though. It can be tricky, so you want to make sure that you're using the correct vendor numbers and I should say the correct remit to number on your EDI invoices when you send them to us. I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see often with EDI errors is, let's say you have a vendor number 1, 2, 3, 4, but it's got 5 preceding zeros because remit numbers are 9 digits long. If you leave those zeros off, that is going to cause an error, and the system will not know whose invoice this belongs to, which again means that three-way match, that purchase order, invoice, and receipt process won't take place, and ipso facto, you don't get paid. So you're going to want to make sure that that remit to number is correct, and it does have preceding zeros on it. It happens so often. It happens so often that I wanted to make sure that it's on this slide. There's a plethora of other of things that could go wrong with EDI transmissions, but this I see so often that I wanted to make sure that we touch on it here. And also, you want to make sure that the item numbers are valid, okay, and that these item numbers are set up in our item maintenance application. A lot of that goes through the buyer, but if the item is not set up, it's going to again cause an error because we won't know what you're paying for or what you've sent us. So before you send invoices, you'll want to make sure that the items are correctly set up in our system. I spoke earlier about purchase order numbers, or about purchase orders. You want to make sure that the purchase order number that you send to us on that EDI transmission is a 6-digit number. Again, I'll touch briefly on the difference between Sears and Kmart. If you're sending product to both formats, that Sears PO number is going to be 6 digits, while that Kmart is going to be 9 digits. So the Kmart number is a longer number. Be sure that you're sending a 6-digit Sears PO back to us on that Sears merchandise invoice. Also want to make sure that you're using a valid unit number. A lot of times people, for whatever reason, will make up their own unit number and put that on an invoice because they have not inquired as to what the right unit number is or the right distribution center number is. Again, if that number is incorrect and we don't find it in our system, the invoice will not process correctly and it will sit and cycle and you won't get paid, and then you'll have to send an email to that aphhelp@searshc.com to find out what happened. We also ask that, and this one's a little bit tricky, we also ask that you only provide one invoice per purchase order number. Now, is that a hard and fast rule? No. However, whenever there are 2 or 3 or multiple invoices on a purchase order, it will increase the cycle time for all of that stuff to match. So instead of it being a 3-way match, it becomes a 5-way match, some crazy like that. So that will take, if you have 3 invoices for one purchase order number, all of that stuff will have to match together, and it will have to be done manually in the background, which will then delay payment. And I think everyone here will agree we do not want to delay payment. So please, one invoice per purchase order number. So now that we kind of know the nuts and bolts of how some of this stuff works, I wanted to talk a little bit about the errors that I see most often. And because remember, whenever something doesn't get paid, it's usually some systemic error. Everything that we do is automatic. Things get fed into the system, things match, and things get paid out. So it's not like someone took a vacation day and something didn't get paid. So something in the system is missing. Some information is systemically missing, and that's why something didn't go through or did not get paid. So those errors and some of that invalid or missing information, that's what we're going to talk about right now. Again, I mentioned PO purchase order numbers, invalid purchase order numbers, invalid store numbers, 5, 6-digit store numbers. Those are two of the big things that the biggest thing again is having the incorrect remittance number or remit to number on the EI. But right behind that is PO numbers and unit numbers. Because again, if you've got a unit number 1, 2, 3, 4, and that receipt is sitting at 5, 6, 7, 8, that PO and that receipt will never match to the invoice, and again, no payment will generate. I've also on this, as you can see on the slide here, I've got some EDI content data that will, if that stuff is incorrect, that will cause the EDI invoice will not necessarily reject, but it will need to be looked at manually. And receiving on the order of 10,000 invoices a day from various vendors, when something does go into error, though I have a small team, it will take them some time to get to it, to look at it. When it goes into an error file, it takes a while for us to get to that and see what's the error. So something as simple as the invoice being out of balance. If the header says that the total of this invoice is $30, but the data adds up to $32, an invoice is out of balance, it's going to go to the error file. It will have to be looked at manually, and which will again, it will slow down that matching process, slow down payment process, things like that. You see invalid KSN or item numbers on here. That goes back to what I was talking about with IMA. If the item is not set up correctly, or there's just a mismatch in that item number or the information behind it, that will also cause that PO to go, or excuse me, that invoice, when it comes to EDI, it will go into error, has to be looked at manually, and again, on the order of 10,000 of these things a day, take some time to kind of weed through them, even just the ones that go to error. Take some time to get to. So that's just not a fair warning, just sort of between you and I. Okay, make sure that invoice information is correct as best you can. One of the things we like to see, or like to say, is be proactive. So you can wait until you can send invoice information in and wait until you don't get paid, or you can check on these things. As soon as an invoice matches, it's going to go out there into a pending status, and you'll be able to see that information there. You'll be able to see what's coming. Essentially, your receivables are going to show up in our system, and you can make sure, hey, this invoice is, I sent this invoice in. You can see when it matches. You can see when it's set up for payment. You usually see the payment date, the amount, et cetera, et cetera. Any claims against it. All that stuff will be available. And I'll show you a little bit more about that in just a minute here. But so, again, being proactive, you want to validate purchase order numbers. If you do not have valid PO information, you'll contact the buyer and or merchant that you've been working with on our side, on the Sears side. As far as invoice goes, you want to validate everything on that invoice. Again, PO numbers, unit numbers, item numbers, pricing amounts, the difference between eaches and cases. Sometimes we have discrepancies between, you send one case and the PO was set up as, one item, one each, essentially. That will cause a difference because the total amount of the invoice will be out of balance. So again, if there are differences in quantity or differences in pricing, it will let the invoice match, but it will take a claim for the difference. So if we ordered 10 and you sent 12, it's going to take a claim for those 12, or for the 2 left over there, and we'll pay you for the 10 that we ordered. So things like that. Questions so far?
Hold on, there is a question.
Oh, okay.
Okay. There's a question from the group. When we see that an invoice is only partially matched, how do we determine why it isn't a completely matched invoice? And generally that happens when there's missing items from that invoice being billed and the receipt coming from our receiving location. And that's what drives us to have a partially matched invoice, which will cycle up until the point that your terms are, and it will cut and run and pay you for what we've received.
We'll let that digest for a second. All right. Again, if you need additional information in addition to that, you can just ask whatever you need. You'll let me know if there's more pop-ups. Okay, cool. Back to the current slide here. I've got again payment discrepancies. We all know it's just going to delay payment. That's what we're all here for. Make sure we don't delay that payment. So. Here. If we do have issues, let's say you're looking and you do see issues with an invoice, and the invoice is for example $10, and you see there's only 9 coming towards you, and there's a claim for $2. That's when you can send that information, bundle that up in an email, send that to aphelp@searshc.com, and you can ask them, hey, what's going on? You don't have to wait until the actual date of payment or the actual payment is generated. Let us know, hey, it looks like I've got a claim out here. Can you let me know what this claim is for? Let's say that claim is for a mismatch in receipt amount. Usually it's as simple as sending proof of delivery. We call it POD. Send us proof of delivery, and backup for that. Send that to that aphelp@searshc.com. We can reverse those claims, and then you'll get paid the full amount of that invoice. So, easy. I think it's easy. Again, aphelp@searshc.com is your best friend there.
Just as a side note, we do not have that information on the Sears Vendor portal to tell you what is partially matched and what is missing. So to Jonathan's point, if you see an invoice is partially matched and some time has gone by, it's probably better to be proactive and send in the proof of delivery on that so that we can resolve that before the invoice is actually due.
So, recap here again. Correct information leads to invoices paid on time. All right. Deductions that are issued for discrepancies in quantity and pricing, and there are other miscellaneous claims that happen as well. Let's say the vendor performance claims are also deducted from payments. There are X claims for new stores. Those are handled with the buyers, with approval from buyers. All these things you can contact AP Help for information there, or you can work with that buyer if you think something's just sticking to you and you really don't believe something is correct or you're getting paid correctly. You can work with the buyer. We will go with them. If they say yay or nay to approve such things. But claims can be reversed. Things can be paid back. No worries there. So just make sure the information coming in on those invoices are correct. That will alleviate most issues that you're going to run into. I'll discuss here briefly some of the claims that you could run into. Again, on the list here I've got quantity claims, pricing claims, miscellaneous claims, return goods claims, sometimes we call those RGIs, X claims, and then vendor compliance claims. A lot of claims. So, the screens here I have here, I do not have screens here for the Sears vendor portal, so I'm just going to show you Sears Business Exchange here, but what I really want you to take away from this is sort of the methodology used to gather some of that information on your own so that you can be, again, proactive, and before a payment is due, you can be proactive at finding out some of that information and letting us know when there are discrepancies and when there are merchandise issues. We can fix them before payment is due so that maybe you get paid on time the right amount. Okay? So looking here, if you have we call it an SQC or a source quantity claim, you essentially where there's a difference in the amount of product that we received. Source quantity claims are going to start with a Q. So you look at that claim number, starts with a Q, you know it's quantity claim. Okay. Again, that information, if you think there's a discrepancy there, plug it into an email, aphelp@searshc.com. We can look into that for you. Send us a proof of delivery, and we can reverse those claims before payment is due. super important that you get it before payment is due so that the full payment amount is sent to you on time. Again, as I spoke about here, you've got email options, you've got fax options. You can also mail in some of these claims. You want to mail information in. You can overnight it into us. I don't know why you'd ever use just regular snail mail to get it done. Payment might be due before that snail mail gets to us and gets processed. So stick to the email or that fax. The fax is also answered. Several versions of that fax are sent out to the team at large to make sure that somebody always sees it and that email is tracked or that fax is tracked. Okay. Cost claims. Cost claims, essentially we have a difference in what you say the item is, the cost of the item, and then what we've agreed upon that the cost of the item is and how it's set up in our system. Okay, those cost claims, they're going to begin with a D as in David. Well, those cost claims, usually, you're going to have to talk with the buying team, and because there's going to be a difference in what was agreed upon with those cost claims more often than not. And our buyer, we in AP we cannot answer that question. We don't know what the agreed upon price was for a product or cost was for a product. So that's going to, if you send that information to us, we are then going to have to forward that to the buyer to get their approval to reverse any sort of claims related to pricing of items. But that's still, you can still send it to us. And then just understand that we are sending it on to the buying team to have them give us an answer. So if you've already spoken to the buying team about a discrepancy in the price or the cost of an item, don't think you're going to get a different answer from accounts payable, because we're just going to go back to that same buyer and ask them what it should be. Okay? But you can still send that information to us and have us forward it for you.
But we should always try to go to the buyer on pricing issues, as they were the ones that negotiated the deal. It will be quicker to resolve it. They'll be more responsive to your sales rep than they will be to us. They have multiple things that they're doing throughout the day and may not always take our stuff seriously.
All right, moving on here a little bit. This just kind of reiterates what we just spoke about, that the cost plans be worked out between you and your sales rep and our buyer. So, some of the miscellaneous claims, those claims are going to start with an A. The claim number is going to start with an A. There are over, shorts, and damages, and then VIF claims. They kind of fall into this miscellaneous claim area. Whenever there's a lot on the screen here, I apologize. For RRCs, over, shorts, damages, that information can be found online, I believe. Is that in the Sears portal already? I think that's in the Sears portal, the Sears vendor portal. The RRC information, I'm not sure they've ported that over yet. For RRCs for distribution centers, we've got the vendor irregularity forms. Those are also filled out.
Yeah, those get passed on to the transportation companies.
Right. They can get those on. I'm not sure what's still in the Sears vendor chain or what's on. Great. So looking at the example here, getting an invoice from a vendor. Okay. That invoice goes to term, doesn't get paid. Then you find out that that shipment was damaged. There is a form to fill out to go back, and depending on the deal that was made between the vendor and buyer, what the resolution of that, whether we're going to pay for some of that or none of that, that's going to again be between you and the buyer. And how that got set up in the first place. So there's a form for that. We will then process that form, and then depending on the resolution of it, that is how you'll get those invoices will be resolved based on the forms and kind of the agreements that you've made with that damaged or regular product. That's the best way I can say it there. So, questions so far? Any questions on it?
In regards to a POD, it really stands for proof of delivery. It's your bill of lading. If it's collect, it's the receiving stamp if it's prepaid.
So again, these claims, we will automatically take these claims if you dispute them. We'll need a copy of the invoice, proof of delivery, and then that documentation will be sent to us. We'll then send it on to the buyer, and we'll figure out, based on, because it's kind of case by case and vendor by vendor, what we decided to do with these type of claims between Sears and the vendor. So I can't really say we're going to actually do this, 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 and this, because it's going to be a little different with everybody there. So. Claims for returned goods, also known as RGIs. These will just get deducted straight off. Anything that gets returned. Some things are returned to the vendor. Some things are destroyed. Some things, there's different resolutions for the actual product, but we will then deduct that from any checks that go out or from any payments that go out. So when you see claims that start with a B, B as in boy, you can see those are returned good claims. And those are pretty straightforward. Whatever resolution you've set up for that product, we will take that action. So if it's to destroy it, if it's to package it up and send it back to a particular place for the vendor. Some of them are replenishment centers, not replenishment centers. Some of them are reconditioning centers. We will do that. We'll deduct it. If there are discrepancies on RGIs, then send that information to AP Help, SearsAC.com. We'll then look into those. Again, we might contact the buyer on that and kind of see, okay, what was the agreed upon resolution to the product? And again, case by case with each vendor, so I can't go into specifics on what we do with, right here. But your sales reps and our buyers will come to a conclusion on all that stuff before we actually do business. So if you're already doing business with us, it's all set up already. We can let you know what that resolution currently is. We can certainly do that, let you know what's supposed to happen to that product, and we'll make sure that happens. Moving on to some of these claims that I'm going to go into now are not generated by AP. So when you come to us with these, like let's say this one on the screen here, an X claim for new store discounts. Again, claim number starts with an X. Those aren't generated from the AP system, from accounts payable. So we won't be able to provide you information on who processed the claim, why that claim is there, the validity of that claim. But you send it to us, you'll notice that all we do is package that claim or that email up, send it off to whichever team it goes to. But we are at the mercy of them when it comes to answering that question for those particular X claims. Also, here, vendor compliance claims, we have a vendor compliance team. Their timeline for resolution of claims and for filing claims is a little bit different from accounts payable. We've got 2 years, I believe, for accounts payable if you have claims to come back on. Vendor compliance is much, much shorter than that. I believe it's 90 days.
I wouldn't quote the timeline. I think there's some training sessions for that.
Okay, we'll leave it to them then. But when you see a vendor compliance claim, it starts with a V as in Victor. When you see those claims, jump on those immediately because, like I say, their timelines that you can dispute a claim are a lot shorter than ours, and so they'll close those cases much more quickly than we are. Again, this right here just kind of says what I just said. Compliance claims can be worked out between you and the compliance team. They should be addressed as promptly as possible to make sure they get looked at before kind of the time expires on those. And proper documentation is going to be needed to reverse anything. They will reverse them from their end, and payment will generate through the AP team. But again, we don't have the power to reverse those or to help you on the dispute process. So if you start sending repeated emails to AP Help, just know that, again, all we're doing is passing those along to the vendor compliance folks, And I think if you have not already spoken to them, I think that's, again, part of the training you'll receive a little bit later. So here, question.
No. Are there any questions?
Sorry, any questions so far? Go ahead and type those in if you need to. You can unmute yourself, say it out loud.
So I see a couple of chat questions that may have just come through since I'm the host, so I just want to make sure to saw them. There's one from Rhonda. She's asking, when she sends information from the buyer, she says your team goes back until we contact the buyer, but she's already attached the backup information, so she wants to know how to address that with your team.
I mean, I'm going to tell you personally, this is Ken Corbat, and I'm the director of AP. I would prefer the buyer to send it to my team, so there is no, we know exactly where it came from, and that's the route it should really go. That was the point I was trying to make with the pricing claims. If there is a pricing claim or a buyer needs to resolve something, we want it to come from them and their controller, so that we know financially they've accounted for it, and we have all authorization to repay it.
Okay, great. Another question, and again, if you're seeing these and you already answered them, just let me know. There's one from Linda. She's saying, how do we get a full trial balance of all invoices and claims? Couldn't find it on the portal. So do we send an email to AP Help for trial balance?
You can. I do not believe that the vendor portal at this point in time, it allows you to look up individual invoices, but I don't think it gives you a trial balance.
Okay. So Linda, you would email AP Help then?
Yeah, you can email the team, they can run a report for you.
Awesome. Okay, I think that's all I see right now.
That's it. Yeah, I'm only seeing a couple of them, sorry. So, yes, if you see any more, let us know.
Okay.
I saw a couple of the questions that I don't know how they're showing up on my screen, but in any case. Do we have any anybody else that wants to add a question at this point? Okay. So the next slide is where we're going to talk about collect and prepaid shipments. Basically, the difference between a collect shipment and a prepaid shipment is who's paying the carrier to make the delivery. On what we consider to be a prepaid shipment, the vendor pays the carrier to deliver the goods. The carrier is responsible for the goods up until the point that it gets to my dock. Unlike a collect shipment where you tender the load to the carrier, at which time we take possession, our driver is responsible for taking those goods from your warehouse to my warehouse. Some of the things that we find to be the most difficult for us in resolving with our vendors is when we have a collect shipment, but it's marked shipper load and count or said to contain or anything where the carrier has no ability to validate what's on the truck. And those are the disputes with our vendors that we get, the most trouble with, because my carrier is no longer responsible. So then it makes it a dispute between your company and my company. And, where the driver can count the load or say that there's 5 pallets or acknowledge something on that load, we want to try to do that. I understand from a logistics standpoint, we want trucks to pick up the stuff fairly quickly, not necessarily always count it, get it from point A to point B. We're just here to tell you that anytime that my carrier doesn't count the load from an AP perspective, we generally have some disputes. Okay. Then from a prepaid perspective, since it's your carrier, anytime that they deliver goods into one of our facilities, they are going to be handed if there is a discrepancy, they're going to be handled the overshort damage at OS&D report or the DIF at the time that they pick up that trailer, if there was any discrepancies at that point in time. And we expect to get that information back. And if there's a clear, let's just say they received, shipped 50 pallets and they received 50 pallets, that will also be on the paperwork. And if for some reason there's a shortage, that's the paperwork we expect to get back so that we can validate that our facility checked in or at least signed for 50. And if they signed for 50, they're liable for 50. So we need to pay you back for that kind of any shortages that happen in those respects.
Questions there? We'll collect shipments versus prepaid shipments. Okay. As promised, here's some key things to remember, some takeaways. Remember for EDI stuff, for your EDI transmissions, your vendor number, your AKA remit to number, needs to be 9 digits in length, including any preceding zeros as necessary. You'll want to make sure that the item is set up and there's a valid KSN in IMA that is between you and the buyer, or between the salesperson and the buyer, to make sure that those items are set up and valid information is entered in the system before the invoice is sent in. And once it's sent in, and if it's wrong, you'll have to back that out and we'll have to send in a new invoice to cover for it. No, you're fine. Okay. When looking up information, here it refers to Sears Business Exchange. For most of you, it's going to be the Sears Vendor Portal. You'll make sure that you'll enter the complete document invoice number, and then when you're for the invoice, when you're entering in the claim number, you're actually going to enter the last 6 digits of that claim number, along with your remittance or remit to number, in order to get that information pulled. Okay, and that'll help you out tremendously when you're looking for that information and when you're trying to be proactive. Okay. Again, store POs are 6 digits, along with distribution center POs. They're 6. Basically, Sears PO numbers, purchase order numbers are going to be 6 digits. This is in contrast to the 9 digits for Kmart products. So if you do business with both formats, just make sure that you're that you don't get those two confused, because you send a 6-digit PO to the Kmart format and vice versa, and that will again stop that invoice from getting paid. So those are the some key things to remember right there. Again, aphelp@searshc.com. That's going to be your best bet to make sure that your email does not get lost in the shuffle, so to speak. It is tracked, it is counted, it is timed, and we try to get those responses to you as quick as possible. Sometimes it can take up to 3 days to get a response, depending on how heavy the volumes are, just in general with vendor questions and invoice inquiries, things like that. Trial balance inquiries, stuff like that. So, and if you're getting set up on the Sears Vendor Portal, moving away from Sears Business Exchange, again, vendors@searshc.com is going to be sending an email to them. You'll transact with them. AP, accounts payable, does not set up that relationship and cannot actually set you up in the system. So if you send me or my colleagues a request to get set up in there, we won't be able to help you. We can only pass that information along to you. I'm not sure. I don't think my email address is provided in this presentation, but I will let you know right now. It is jonathan.johnson@searshc.com. That Jonathan is JONATHN at Sears, .Jonathan@searshc.com. If you want to contact me directly. So I welcome any and all questions myself. If I get too many of them, again, I'll pass them to the team to help me out on those. But remember, sending them to AP Help, that generic email address, is probably your best bet to make sure that they do not get missed. So last call, any questions? Last call for any questions. Nothing there, nothing there. looks like I'm giving you back about 10, 12 minutes.
Ramona, do you have any more questions that popped up on the chat? Ramona?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, you know.
Yeah.
Okay. It kicked me out, so I had to quickly log back in to my phone, so out of the actual webinar itself. It just suddenly kicked me out of both the webinar and the phone. So wrapped up?
So we're just wrapping up there, and we were asking if there were any questions that you could see that we could not see on our end. We wanted to make sure that they all got answered while we're all.
At the point that I got kicked out of the webinar, which was just like 1 or 2 minutes ago. So I think at this point they've all been answered. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to get on your phone and ask them right now too. You can always send one of us an email if you think of it after the presentation as well. We'll make sure it's answered for you. Does anybody have any other questions? Okay, if you don't have any questions, have a great day. Happy Monday.
Thank you very much.